everyone, and welcome to another Rubber Dance Design Team tutorial. Today I'm going to be stamping onto acetate and showing you how to use your acrylic paints to create a really funky background. We're going to be using the Rubber Dance stamps from the Twiggy Leaves and the Da Vinci stamp sets. So here is a quick glimpse of the cards that we're going to make today, and you can see they really do have an unusual look, and I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. So I'm going to talk you through some of the things that you need to think about when you're stamping on your acetate. These are the two stamps that I'm going to be using from the Twiggy Leaves collection, and I'm going to be stamping on a 4 1/4 inch square of acetate for each of the versions of my card. So you stamp in the normal way by inking up your stamp and then pressing it onto the acetate, but there are a couple of things that you need to know. One is that you use the right kind of ink. We need a solvent-based ink. I like to use StazOn. I'm not sure what other versions of this kind of ink there are out there. This is probably the most famous one, and you can see it's a solvent-based ink. I'm using a timber brown, and it comes with a little plastic container or plastic cover that sits over the ink pad itself. Now don't throw this away, keep this and replace it once you've finished using your ink pad, and it will help prolong the life of the ink that is in the pad, because it helps stop that solvent evaporating. Now I always like to buy a refill at the same time as buying these ink pads, just in case you forget to put the lid on, for one thing, and also if you're in quite a dry environment or you're going to be using this a lot, then the actual refill is probably quite a good idea. So when you're placing your image down, I've got a little bit of a big acetate block here, so I'm just trying to make sure that I get the best position so I can place this down carefully without moving the stamp. And again, when you're putting the pressure onto the stamp, you don't want to push that stamp over the shiny surface and get a smudged image. Now at this point my acetate did stick, and this is quite normal, don't worry about it, but because it has allowed me to lift this up without moving it, I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure in the middle of that stamp to make sure I've picked up all of that image before I gently peel the acetate away. And once I've put this against the white card, you can see I've got quite a nice image there. This really is a detailed stamp, and I'm quite happy with how that's turned out. I just want to add a little bit of detail at both corners of the square, so I'm going to repeat the process by inking up the slightly smaller branch. So be a little bit careful not to smudge your images whilst they're still wet, and as I said, be very careful how you put the stamp down and that you don't move it once you have placed it in position. And that's my second image. Now this is going very well for me at the moment, considering I want to show you what to do if it goes wrong. But I'm not going to tempt fate. Let's see if we actually manage 3 stamps without making a mistake, and I will chat to you about what to do if you do smudge your images. Now I just happen to be quite lucky here that this has worked out first time, but it doesn't always happen like that, because it is really quite tricky stamping on that slick surface. So for my second card, I'm going to be using the Daisy from the Da Vinci set to create a border, and then I'm going to use one of the ladies, one of the female images from that same set, to form the centre image on my second card. So again, I'm inking up with the StazOn ink. And I've just noticed, you can see there it says for every surface on the top of the ink pad. Now the first time I do this, I suddenly think, actually, considering I'm going to put a daisy frame all the way around her, I haven't put her in the right position. And that works out quite good for the fact that I can then show you exactly what to do if you get something wrong. Now something else you might notice while we get to the point where I show you what to do if you make a mistake is that the first couple of stamps of this little daisy, and it's a shame really because they've turned out rather perfectly, are slightly on the black side, and so that's something else you might want to look at. I use archival ink a lot and don't really clean my stamps. So the StazOn has done the job of removing the black ink, and you can see that those first couple of daisy images look black rather than brown. But again, that will give me the opportunity to show you what to do if things don't go quite according to plan. So whenever you're stamping with StazOn onto acetate, and I think this image is a little bit light, you want a little bit of kitchen roll on standby and some blending alcohol. This is the Ranger alcohol that comes with alcohol inks. And I'm just removing the two daisies, one that I thought was a bit light and one that I thought was a little bit black. And then I still haven't quite decided that I really should stamp all the way around this lady, so I'm going to go again. Now when you go the second time and you've used your alcohol on your acetate, just make sure that that has dried off, otherwise it will increase the possibility of slipping with the stamp because the acetate will be wet. And here I've kind of decided that she's not quite in the right place, so I'm going to remove her completely. Just be careful not to spoil any of the other images with your finger in particular, like I just did on that daisy at the bottom. I put my finger on it. So I'm going to remove it again, because although this is quite a quick drying ink, it does stay wet for just a little while. So just be aware of where you're placing your finger before that ink is finally dry. And the other thing that I'm doing is making sure that I haven't got any smudges of ink remaining, so it's all nice and clean before I try that again. So I'm coming back and stamping this lady who is very thoughtful and has lovely long curly hair. And because she is quite long, I'm going to use the alcohol to just square her off a little bit, because this is a square of acetate. She's quite long, and again she's encroaching on the area where I want to put that daisy frame, so I can just remove the bottom of the stamped image, again just using my blending alcohol, and I'm just removing enough of that lovely hair to allow me to stamp those daisies along the bottom, and then just cleaning up any smudges. You could use, perhaps for more delicate areas that you want to remove, a cotton bud to get into the detail if you've only got a small space or a small thing to remove in amongst other stamping. And then I'm just finishing off my frame by stamping daisies all the way around my acetate square. So before we move on to the next step, make sure you put the lids back onto your StazOn ink so it doesn't dry out, and I am making sure the ink is dry and then flipping the images over. So the stamped area of the acetate is now against the white paper. And the first thing that I'm going to do is use this light blue paint to colour in the stamped images that I have already on my square of acetate. So I'm literally just filling in the area of the stamp. I'm not filling in any detail in particular, I'm just colouring right over the entire area of the stamp. This will make more sense as we build the layers up. And then I'm doing exactly the same with those daisy images. So literally I'm colouring in each of the petals and then over the flower centre. Going in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. You can see I don't really need to go right to the edge of the stamp, so you don't have to be the world's best painter to do this technique. And I'm just, the most sort of delicate part is the actual petals of the daisy in this instance. So I've got a nice thin brush and I'm just filling in each of those individual petals. Now if you make a mistake, again whilst the paint is wet, you can just remove that with a little bit of kitchen roll. You don't need the alcohol this time, just a bit of damp kitchen roll or a baby wipe will remove any mistake you make with the acrylic while it's wet. Now you might think that the area that I've coloured over on the lady stamped image looks a little bit patchy. Now you might find when you turn it over it is fine, but if you have a little peek underneath your image whilst your paint is drying and you think that you've got a few gaps and things are looking a little bit transparent, you can let that acrylic dry a little bit, which mine has done whilst I've been filling in those daisies, and you can just increase the amount of paint you've got on the back of the image. And you can see here as I turn this over and give you a look at the other side, what that first level has done. So we've highlighted our images in the blue, and it really does make the details of the stamps pop out. Now we need to do exactly the same for the leaf stamp. So this one's going to be considerably easier to fill in because the shapes are less fiddly than those daisies. And I'm just colouring in all of those leaves, and then I'll just do a little bit of a line where you can see the branch and a little bit where the leaf at the bottom joins onto that branch. In effect, what we're creating now is, one, giving our image some colour, and two, we're completing the first step so that we can create that painty and textured background. Okay, so we've completed step one and the acrylic paint on my image is now dry, so we're ready to move on to step two. So again, placing the image so that we're working on the acrylic paint side that we've already started. We're going to add some texture with different colours of paint. So starting out with one of my favourite ways to add texture to any project, and that's the splatter technique. I'm going to work on both of these at the same time. So I'm just creating a little puddle of paint by adding a little bit of water to make the acrylic paint a little bit more runny, and then tapping my paintbrush against a pencil just to create some splatter across the background. Now you need to remember, one, to keep your stamps out of the way while you're splattering, because you don't want any acrylic paint drying on those, and two, in between each of these little steps you want to let the paint dry. So I need to let that splatter dry before adding my next lot of texture. So now I've taken a pen lid and some dark blue paint, and I'm just adding some random circles. So I'm using the pen lid as a stamp to create some circles in what will become the background of this image. Now at this point it's worth pointing out that all those places where you see me stamping over the blue paint that I've already laid down, you will not be able to see when you turn this over. So you will only be able to see the sections of paint that show around those daisy stamps and the image stamps that we've filled in with the blue paint. So in effect they're masking them from these background textures that we're adding now. So I've got a slightly smaller pen lid and some burgundy paint, and I'm stamping a few more random circles. I'm also creating a little bit of burgundy splatter. And a little bit of navy blue splatter. And my final step before I let everything dry, I'm just checking how much texture I've created, is to use the end of my paintbrush to create some little groups of dots, again in that pale blue. So I'm just grouping together 3 little dots or so at a time and including them on the background, sort of filling in some of the spaces that haven't got circles, if that makes sense. Now I've had a little cup of coffee and I've let all of that background stamping dry before moving on to the next step, which is filling in the background completely this time. So I'm just creating myself some different colours of paint, or different shades of the paint colours that I've already used. So I'm mixing some of the lighter paints into the darker paints to create another shade of colour, but this colour will still remain in the same family of colours that I've already used. So I've got a light and a mid blue, as well as the dark blue, and I've got a light burgundy. I'm just going to lighten that up a fraction more. Starting out with the burgundy paint and a stippling brush, I'm just adding a few little stipples of that dark paint. And this is where things start to look messy, but it will make sense once you turn this over. And I'm just showing you all the different things that you could do to create texture in the background. So I'm repeating that stippling with the brush with the dark blue, and you'll be able to see which of those techniques or which of those things you might want to use on your project. Now, I am drawing my little stipples with my heat gun, but I'm making sure to keep my heat gun well away from the acetate, otherwise it will just curl up and you'll ruin all your work. I'm really just causing a draft to make that acrylic paint dry a little bit quicker. And then I'm coming back in with some of the mid blue, again just creating some little splats across the background and filling in all those gaps. And finally I'm coming back in once everything is dry, and you will see I'm just filling in first of all with some more of that stippling, and then I will completely cover the background. I'm just checking on my coverage. So I've decided that I am going to completely cover the background now with that sort of pinky coloured paint, but I do need to make sure that everything else is completely dry. So if I were you, I'd leave it for a little while, or you can do what I'm doing here, which is wafting the heat gun over your work. I really am just causing a draft. I am not going anywhere near the acetate with the heat of the heat gun because it will just shrivel up. So be warned, if you want to be safe, then just let it dry naturally and then come back in with your background colour and cover your entire piece of work. That way you'll be sure you've got no gaps in the acetate and that you've covered your background completely. And you can see there the lovely effect that we've achieved with all that texture that we've added layer by layer, and then finally finishing off with coat of the pink to fill in all of the gaps. And then it's time to move them both to one side and to let them dry completely. I've decided to make little curved banners to have the words that are going to go on the front of my card, and I'm using this dream stamp for one of them, and then I'm going to use one of the quotes that also come in the Da Vinci set for the second card. So just trying to stamp straight on this strip so I can trim this up, and I'm going to create a little strip of blue card with the word dream. And you can see here I'm just trimming that into a little strip, and I've left the ends long because that is how I'm going to attach it to the card, and I'm not quite sure how long I want to leave them at the moment. So just making sure that everything is nice and straight. Well, this little bit of editing has taken me quite a few takes to do, because every time I tell you who said these words, I keep saying the wrong person. So the quote comes on the Da Vinci set of stamps, and it says, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." And it was said by Mr. Leonardo da Vinci not DiCaprio, as I keep saying. So Leonardo da Vinci said, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." And I'm just cleaning off my stamp after stamping the first line, and then I am masking up so that all we have showing when we ink up the stamp is the word sophistication. And then don't forget to remove your post-it notes, and then you can stamp that single line into place. So I dropped the stamp, so re-inking, and then now I can create 2 word strips with my quote. So my card bases are in light blue. They measured 11.5 inches by 5 3/4 inches, and then I scored them at 5 3/4 inches. Then I have 2 squares of cardstock to matte and layer my acetate artwork, and I've got one in the dark blue and one in that sort of dusty dark pink colour. And I'm going to attach the pink to the blue, and I will attach the acetate to that. So I'm doing that for both pieces of card. And then I'm going to trim up my little word strips. So I've already done dream, and now I'm working on the 2 strips that will form the second quote on my cards. And again, don't forget to leave a little bit of length in those strips, and I will show you how I'm going to attach them to create another layer on these cards. So just making sure they're both the same width for my second card, and then I'm going to mat and layer them on the pink and blue cardstock to match the frames that I've already created for my acetate artwork. So I'm literally just sticking it onto a spare piece of the pink card and then trimming them so that they have a layer of colour top and bottom. So I'm going to do the opposite way round for the second quote. So I'm starting with the blue and ending with the pink, and for the word dream I'm starting with the pink and ending with the blue. So at this point I turned my camera off, and then I forgot to turn it back on again, so I've missed one step, and that is where I attached each of my art panels to my card. All I did was attach the acetate to the pink and the blue squares using 4 little brads, and then I attached the whole piece to the card using glue. So it's not a major step, but I did miss it out. So now you can see how I attached each of those little word strips. So I've trimmed them to roughly about 1/2 inch at each side of the word strip, and then I have curved them and just flicked those ends slightly forward so that they are flat against the card, and then I've pushed the card so it creates a slight arch, and then hold it in position on your card and attach it with a brad. So I'm using the matte pin to punch the hole in the first instance, and as you can see I've already done that once. I've had to undo it in order to be able to film this bit, and then I'm attaching it to the card with a little brad. Now you could do this with tape or glue, but I warn you that the chances are that that curve that we're creating in the card will push either the glue or the sellotape away in time, and this little strip will come away. So by using the brads it works a whole lot better. So you can see, so the brads attach the acetate to the little card squares, and then the brads are attaching the little strips to the card face. And you can see that you can't see the brads on the initial square that attached the artwork, but you can see the brads that attach the little word strips to the card front. And I've got a plan for how I'm going to create the inner so that you can't see those little brads. So I've got the word dream on the first card and simplicity is the ultimate sophistication on the second, and you can see I've used blue brads on this one. So we need to come up with a way of covering up those brads. So I'm going to go to creating a traditional style inner which will do the trick. So I'm just folding a piece of A4 paper in half. So I wanted them to stand out a little bit, so I've got as near to the pink that I have on the front of the card as I can, and then I'm going to trim each of them into a 5.5-inch square, bearing in mind not to cut along that folded edge, otherwise you will have to get another piece of paper and start again. I've decided again not to add a greeting to this inner because I think it would make quite a nice note card. So I'm just going to create a little bit of interest with my daisy stamp. So I'm just going along the top and the bottom of the paper insert with the little daisy stamp, and I'm using a scrap of paper to avoid making a huge mess on my craft mat. And then I'm going to do exactly the same, but this time using the little leaf stamp. So I've got daisies on one inner and leaves on the other, and it's always really nice to have an inner that matches the outside of your card, just hinting at the design that's on the outside. You can see why I thought that this might make a very nice card to write a note in, or a thank you note, something similar to that, or a little letter to a friend. So I'm just going to add these inserts. First of all, you want to center them on the back of the card, and then I'm using a strip of strong double-sided tape, and I'm adding that to the folded edge. And I always add or attach my inners to the front of the card. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. So I'm removing the back of my double-sided tape, then I'm centering it again so that it's even all the way around, and you might want to make sure that it's not encroaching on that fold, so that the fold pushes the insert forward when you close the card. And that way, by attaching the inner to the front of the card, it means that when you open up the card, the inner opens at the same time. So I've just run out of my strong double-sided tape, so I'm going to resort to using normal double-sided tape for this second inner. Just had to run away and get that. So I'm adding that to the top section along the folded edge, then removing the backing of the tape, opening up my card, centering the card on the card back, and then closing the card to attach the inner to the front. And that way, every time you open the card, that inner should open at the same time. I hope you've enjoyed that look at stamping onto acetate and then creating that lovely arty background to create a really modern looking card. These can be done in any colour using any stamps. I'm using my gorgeous rubber dance stamps today, and I hope that you're going to check them out by following the links that I'll leave you at the end of this video. As I come to the end of this video, I just wanted to say a great big thank you to everyone who has supported me, sending messages of encouragement and good wishes, and everyone that's sitting there keeping their fingers and everything else crossed for me as I wait to hear whether I manage to make it onto the Graphic 45 design team. I'm up against some really stiff competition, so no matter what happens, I just wanted to say a great big thank you, because your support really does mean a lot to me, and you know, no matter what happens, I still will have that, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. I really hope that you've enjoyed this technique. I'm sure that you can think of lots of other ways of doing this. It can be done in lots of different colours. You perhaps could go a little bit lighter with the texture in the background. You don't have to go and do all of the different ways that I created texture. You can come up with different ways of adding texture yourself. Just remember to let the layers dry as you build up that background, and then finish off with one continuous coat of colour to make sure that there are no gaps in your work. I have actually already made a second tutorial with a kind of simplified version of this technique, so if you want to check that out as well, either subscribe here, of course, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, or you can follow the link that's in the description below over to Rubber Dance and click on their subscribe button, and you can see all the creativity that goes on over there almost every day, in fact, from somebody in the design team, and see how you can use your rubber dance stamps in so many different ways. So as I wrap this up, don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the video for the links, and I will say, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button and the share button, and I will be back with you again very soon to show and share with you some creativity. Until next time, thank you for watching. So whenever I remember, I always try to date my films when I finish editing them, and this is a very special day in our family's calendar, and I just wanted to, one, test whether my sons watch my videos, but two, to say a very, very happy birthday to my son Damien, because I hope that he does watch this. I just wanted to tell him how much we miss him on a day like today. This is one of my favourite photographs of him and his brother. His little brother is now 16 and Damien is in his 30s. I'm not going to say what exactly, because I don't see why I should get to feel old on Damien's birthday. So I just like to send him lots of love, tell him how much I miss him, and wish that we could be with him to celebrate. Happy birthday, Damien. Click on this link to visit my blog, where you will find the cutting guide for this card, as well as the link to the Rubber Dance blog, where you will be able to see my post on the 26th of April. Don't forget to subscribe while you're there so you don't miss out on any of the creativity that is shared almost every day by the Rubber Dance design team. Alternatively, you can click on this link, which will take you to the Rubber Dance playlist, and I have quite a big list building now of Rubber Dance design team videos where you can find all sorts of creations, and they all are very, very different. Always got some kind of technique that you can try out, as well as lots of ideas for using your Rubber Dance stamps. Sometimes it's a card, sometimes it's an art journal page like this one, sometimes it's a home decor video, but you'll find lots and lots of things to inspire you on that Rubber Dance playlist. So please click on the link to find projects like this one.